It began with a scream. Not one of pain, but confusion. A sharp trill from the Fertial ambassador as she buckled to her knees on the tarmac at Earth's diplomatic port outside Nairobi. The weight of gravity hit her like a crashing wave. Her aides scrambled, flailing to deploy skeletal support frames from their travel packs, while medics rushed forward with stabilizers. Nearby, a Thuran envoy dropped flat, chittering unintelligibly, every limb shaking. Above them all, Earth's morning sun rose with stubborn brilliance, indifferent to the delegation's discomfort. Mark Reyes watched from the shaded entryway of the reception building, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He'd warned them. Everyone on Earth's diplomatic team had. But nothing prepares you for Earth unless you've felt its weight yourself, the full, crushing pressure of a 1G world brimming with oxygen-rich air and unapologetic topography. Within 30 minutes, 5 different species had either collapsed or requested pressurized suits. Coalition medics began oxygen injections, and structural exosuits were wheeled in on auto-assist carts. A few hardy species, like the Chosen and the Palrath, merely groaned and stood hunched, knees shaking as they tried to adapt. And in the middle of the chaos, Mark stepped forward. No powered armor, no assistive tech. Just a plain charcoal uniform bearing the Earth Coalition patch on his shoulder, and the kind of calm that didn't need announcing. "Ambassador Klo," he said, kneeling beside the winded Solari diplomat who was trying and failing to adjust her hydration vents. "Deep breaths. You're on Earth now. Let me help." She blinked at him with bulbous, glassy eyes, breath whistling from the narrow slit of her throat. "This planet, this is madness." Mark offered a faint smile. "You're not wrong." By mid-morning, a full third of the arriving delegations had declared Earth's environment conditionally hostile. The Coalition's planned Unity Games intended as a display of cooperative excellence teetered on the edge of commanded cancellation. But Earth's response was simple: adapt the rules, not the planet. "This is who we are," said Director Liu of Earth's Coalition Affairs Office. "We'll adjust the events to be inclusive, but if you're competing here, you're competing here. No artificial gravity domes, no atmospheric adjustments. Earth is the field." Some called it arrogant, others suicide. The games proceeded. The first day's challenge began at dawn. Event 1, weighted endurance carry, a climb up Mount Suswa's southern ridge with 90 kilograms of equipment, simulating interplanetary field rescue under real gravity. Teams of 2. Coalition protocol allowed use of assistive supports, but only for non-Earth native species. Humans? Raw. Mark Reyes moved like a boulder with legs. Each step up the incline was solid, deliberate, almost rhythmic. The pack on his shoulders looked like an afterthought, the kind of load he'd probably carried 100 times back when he was doing real search and rescue in the Rockies. But he wasn't charging. He wasn't showing off. He was talking. Beside him, Ambassador Klo, specially fitted with carbon-braced limb supports and a custom visor, struggled to keep upright. Her breathing came in high-pitched wheezes. Her third stumble nearly sent her face first into the volcanic gravel if Mark hadn't stepped sideways and caught her with one arm, holding both their loads. "Lean into the slope. Don't fight it. Flow with it," he said gently. "You're not weak. Earth's just a little stubborn." She looked up at him, legs shaking. "This is diplomacy?" "This is the easy part," he grunted, adjusting her pack strap for better balance. "Come on. 5 more meters and we hit the water checkpoint." Behind them, a Glunax delegate sat panting on a hover disc, resigned to medical evacuation. A Vikwari team had stopped entirely, calling for thermal scans of their muscle fibers. But Mark and Klo? They pressed on. It took 47 minutes to summit the ridge. They weren't the fastest, but they were the only mixed-species team that didn't require mid-ascent medical intervention. During the debrief, one coalition commentator, a long-faced, dry-humored Malari named Veth, summarized the moment with a dry drawl piped through thousands of systems. "Well, that's either teamwork or what humans call stubborn optimism. Either way, Ambassador Klo now understands why Earth's native life forms all look like they've had a bad week." That afternoon, the Coalition's internal medical logs flagged Mark's vitals. Slightly elevated heart rate, minor strain to the left deltoid, dehydration markers hovering above standard. A field medic approached him for rest clearance. He declined. Instead, he drank 2 liters of electrolyte water, stretched for 20 minutes, and attended the orientation for the second event. Event 2. Obstacle Course. Constructed in Kenya's Rift Valley, the course was a nightmare of jagged basalt, tension wires, balance beams, and uneven ground tailored to mimic unpredictable terrain. Each participant had to complete it without external help. Aliens dropped like flies. One Threen sprained 3 limbs simultaneously. The Palrath delegate threw up halfway through. Medics dragged a groaning chosen from the mud pit with 4 cracked ribs. Earth's gravity was a relentless trainer. Mark didn't run. He navigated. About a quarter through the course, a balance beam fractured underfoot, not for him, but for the Vikwari female, 2 paces behind. Without hesitation, he dropped flat, catching her upper limbs and redirecting her onto the side rail. It cost him time. It earned him silence. At the wall climb, another alien, a cocky churve named Drellon, snapped his climbing strap and dangled screaming until Mark anchored himself and hauled the panicking creature up with sheer back and arm strength. Only at the last stretch, a crawl beneath suspended pipes spewing hot mist, did Mark misjudge. He didn't account for the shifting gravel beneath the vent's outflow. His foot slid, slamming his knee hard enough to jar his entire leg. He grunted. Didn't cry out, didn't rise right away either. But he didn't keep going until he'd done a self-check. Range of motion test. Pressure. Swelling. Ligaments intact. Not broken. Likely a hard contusion. He kept crawling. He finished 7th overall. He needed ice and compression therapy by nightfall. Coalition medics advised a rest period of 24 hours. He accepted the ice. He ignored the rest. That night, in the shared mess, the talk wasn't about scores. It was about the man who didn't win but didn't stop. He's injured, murmured the Xalarian observer, adjusting his neural scan visor. He should be in medical. He was in medical, replied Veth dryly. He walked out before the scanner finished rendering the knee. The Silary looked troubled. Why does he persist? It's not required. Veth blinked slowly. Because to him, it is. When Chloe approached Mark at the observatory deck, he was resting on a metal bench, knee elevated, sipping hot broth. You should withdraw, she said softly. You're limping. He looked at her, not insulted, just surprised. So? You could make it worse. The challenge tomorrow is cerebral. You're already ahead in the physical metrics. Why risk it? He chuckled, wincing as he shifted his leg. You don't quit halfway just because it hurts a bit. I've worked rescue missions where people were counting on me to push through worse. I'm not trying to prove humans are better. I'm showing we don't back out just because it's hard. Chloe sat beside him, quietly thoughtful. After a moment, she said, You frighten many of us. I know, Mark said, finishing his soup. We frighten ourselves sometimes too. The next morning, the Rift Valley sky wore a layer of bruised clouds, as if mirroring the collective fatigue hanging over the Unity games. The schedule listed Event 3, Cognitive Cohesion and Mental Agility Assessment. A mouthful of a title, designed by the Coalition's bureaucracy to sound noble while remaining intentionally vague. The actual challenge? A labyrinthine logic maze part physical, part mental, constructed from holographic projections and shifting walls, administered by an autonomous Coalition AI named Kali X7. It was designed to test adaptive reasoning, pattern recognition, interspecies communication, and stress response under cognitive load, which, for most contestants still reeling from Earth's gravity, might as well have been a horror simulation. Mark Reyes arrived limping slightly. No braces, no assistive wrap, just measured, careful steps. His knee, though stiff, was functional. He'd followed Rice protocol the night before: rest, ice, compression, elevation, and grudgingly admitted to medics that he'd limit lateral movements today. No one told him the maze would move. Inside the dome, Kali X7's voice hummed with sterile enthusiasm. Welcome, contestants. Cognitive Trial 3. Each team must navigate the mental maze. Instructions are visual, auditory, and environmental. You will receive no direct assistance. Observers will monitor decision flow, neurological stress, and cooperative fluency. Mark's partner today was a chosen linguist named Feralt, a wiry, bird-like alien with a sharp mind and zero tolerance for inefficiency. He regarded Mark like an ill-fitting puzzle piece. "Why not allow a substitute?" Feralt asked, nodding to Mark's leg. "You risk compromising our score." Mark shrugged. "I've already run mazes with a broken toe and altitude sickness. I'll manage." Feralt chittered something inaudible and stalked toward the starting node. Mark followed, eyes narrowed as the maze walls flickered into existence, corridors of glowing data veins, floors that shifted textures, symbols that pulsed irregularly across the surfaces. They were 5 steps in before Feralt cursed. "There are no repeatable patterns," he hissed, scanning the glowing lines. "Every input yields a variable outcome." Mark crouched, brushing his fingers across a triangular tile that vibrated on contact. "What's the penalty for a wrong step?" 3-point neurological feedback spike. "So, a zap." Feralt sighed. "Primitive term, but yes." Mark tapped the tile again. Then once more, this time with a slight counterpressure from his heel. The wall ahead shimmered open not with a fanfare, but a dull pulse of light. He smiled. "Patterns there. You're just looking for math. This one's about weight distribution." Feralt squawked. "But that wasn't in the prompt." "Welcome to Earth," Mark muttered, stepping through. 34 minutes in, Mark had opened 12 false doors and located 5 shortcuts by ignoring Kali X7's suggested routing and trusting his gut. The AI hadn't anticipated that a human might rely on tactile response and instinct more than formal deduction. One of the algorithms stalled halfway through, trying to process his choice to activate a color-coded node based on heat emission patterns from previous steps. "Your human is breaking the maze," muttered a Zalarian observer. "No," Kayla replied, arms crossed. "He's solving it using something none of your models account for. He's improvising." Veth's commentary hummed through the external speakers. "Well, folks, Mark Reyes has bypassed yet another dead-end logic trap by deciding that the sound frequency of the walls felt wrong. He's either playing 4-dimensional chess or guessing really well." Inside, Feralt was visibly sweating, feathers drooping. "This is illogical. You can't keep defying the maze's structure." Mark didn't look back. "You're assuming the structure's the goal. I'm just looking for the exit." That exit came at 41 minutes and 13 seconds. Their team wasn't first, but they were the only pair with 0 neural feedback spikes and a consistent stress drop over time. Kali X7 registered it as algorithmically improbable. Back in the debrief tent, Feralt leaned against a crate, blinking rapidly. "You subverted a coalition AI," he muttered. "I didn't cheat," Mark said, sipping a bottle of salt water. "I just didn't overthink it. But the AI predicted you'd take the long path. You didn't. I've worked disaster zones. Most situations don't have a perfect route. You go with what works. You change your approach if it doesn't. You keep moving." Feralt tilted his head. "This is common for your people?" "Not everyone, but a lot of us learn the hard way. Trial, error, and stubbornness." The official medical report for the day logged a 9% increase in neuromuscular fatigue among participants. Several non-Earth species requested early disqualification, citing cognitive overstimulation. Mark's vitals? Elevated blood pressure, mild dehydration. His knee? Slightly improved, still tender. When medics offered him a pain suppressant and optional brace, he declined both. "I want to feel what I'm pushing," he said. "Pain's feedback." As the sun dipped behind the escarpment, a Palrath engineer named Eugen caught up with him near the cooling stations. She was on medical rest after overexerting herself during the obstacle course. You shouldn't still be walking," she said, eyeing his gait. "Coalition regs recommend 48-hour recovery." Mark looked up from tying his boots. "You ever watch someone wait for rescue, knowing no one's coming? I have. That kind of wait breaks people. That's why you don't stop just because you're tired. You push until someone else doesn't have to." She was silent a long moment. Then, "I thought your kind were reckless. But I think I get it now. You're not reckless. You just refuse to leave the job undone." That evening, alien forums across the Coalition net lit up with clips from the day's maze challenge. One short clip in particular, Mark resting his hand on a glowing panel and murmuring, "Trust it, even if it stings," circulated thousands of times with the caption, "They don't stop, they adjust." Some found it admirable. Others, unsettling. Later that night, in the restricted access tent, Director Liu reviewed incoming Coalition memos. Most were logistical. One was flagged urgent. Coalition Advisory Notice. Pending re-evaluation of human physical and psychological thresholds. Observation. Test subject. Mark Reyes continues to operate beyond standard fatigue parameters. Recommendation. Prepare emergency response for final challenge. Note. Do not underestimate the implications of what Earth calls persistence. The third dawn broke cold. Not bitter, just enough to sink into joints and whisper doubts into tendons still recovering from the previous days. A line of alien participants stood under cloud-choked skies at the temporary Coalition compound in the Ngong Hills. Many were limping, not from injury but sheer fatigue. The games of Unity were barely halfway through, and the weight of Earth was beginning to show in everything they did. Mark Reyes awoke to the familiar ache behind his right kneecap. He didn't curse it, didn't ignore it either. He sat up slowly, braced his hands on the cot frame, and let his breath catch up with his muscles. The contusion from the obstacle course hadn't worsened, but it wasn't improving fast either. He knew the timeline. 4 days for swelling to subside, another 10 for range of motion to normalize longer if he pushed too hard. But there was no backing out now. The Coalition hadn't canceled the final event, and Earth's representative didn't quit halfway. He swallowed a hydration capsule, massaged his thigh to stimulate circulation, then rose and walked outside without waiting for the medics to clear him. Today wasn't another endurance test. It was the final task announced early due to declining alien participation and mounting health concerns. Final event: cooperative shelter construction. Build a survival shelter in a randomized terrain zone, blindfolded, guided only by voice from non-human participants. The Coalition's logic was simple: simulate a post-disaster environment with sensory deprivation and language barriers. Test trust, coordination, and species-to-species reliance. The catch: no powered tools, no visual aids, raw teamwork. The terrain: a dusty plateau scattered with modular pieces and unstable soil. Teams were drawn at random. Mark's assigned group included a Shalarian diplomat named Bren, whose species evolved with no concept of physical labor. A Solari technician named Neva, recovering from heat fatigue. A Glunax medic who'd ruptured a membrane 2 days prior. And Mark, the only one without sensory compensation equipment. A quiet tension hung between them as they stood in the prep zone. "Do you require assistance?" Bren asked awkwardly, noticing Mark's limp. "I'll manage," Mark said. "Let's agree up front. If I'm too slow, tell me. I'd rather be corrected than mess this up." Neva tilted her head. "You are not prideful?" Mark smiled faintly. "Right now, I'm just trying not to fall over." He pulled the blindfold down. Darkness swallowed his vision. Immediately, his other senses kicked up. Gravel underfoot, dry wind, the faint tremor of an anti-grav crane in the distance. "Begin," Calyx 7's voice chimed overhead. "Mark, 2 steps left," Neva said quickly. "Then crouch connector node ahead." He followed, hands sweeping until his fingers found the cool plastic edge of a structural rod. "Anchor it vertical," Bren added, "but angle 5 degrees outward like a leaning tree." "Leaning what?" Bren's voice wavered. "Never mind," Mark grunted, setting the rod into a socket. "Guide me on the next piece." Piece by piece, the frame took shape. His arms strained under the unfamiliar weight distribution, relying entirely on alien voices to compensate for his missing sight. At one point, his left foot caught a jagged edge. He dropped to one knee, pain shooting up his leg. He let out a quiet hiss. "Pause," Neva said immediately. "Your breath rate spiked." "I'm fine," he said through gritted teeth. "No, you're not," Bren snapped. "Raise, we'll guide you. Do not lift again." For once, Mark didn't argue. He adjusted position. Let them talk him through handholds. They called angles, distances, even counterbalancing techniques foreign to most humans. 10 minutes in, the shelter's skeleton was half assembled. 15 in, it was standing. At 23 minutes they locked the final heat shield panel in place. Calyx 7's confirmation tone chirped. Structure integrity, 94%. Build time, 23 minutes, 41 seconds. Blindfolded compliance. Confirmed. Mark pulled off the blindfold slowly. Sweat dripped from his hairline. His hands trembled faintly. His knee throbbed like a siren under his skin. He looked at the shelter. Solid. Stable. He looked at the aliens beside him, exhausted, stunned. "Good work," he said simply, chest heaving. "You trusted us," Bren said quietly, despite being impaired. "I didn't have a choice," Mark replied, sitting heavily on a crate. "Besides, that's kind of the point, isn't it? No one does this alone." An hour later, after the other teams finished, several with collapses or partial failures, the medics finally insisted Mark undergo another scan. He complied. The results were what he expected. Contusion still healing. Micro tears in the quadriceps. Moderate fluid buildup in the joint. Beginning signs of systemic fatigue. The coalition physician looked at him skeptically. "You should be in bed. You've been operating in a functional deficit for at least 36 hours. Mark nodded. "Sounds about right. You could have worsened your knee. Or passed out." "I didn't." "But you could have." "Yeah. But then someone else would have had to pick up where I dropped it." The physician didn't respond, just typed something into the terminal and handed him a cold compress. After the awards were quietly canceled, too many injuries, too much controversy, delegates began drifting out of the mess hall. There were no medals, no podiums, just handshakes, nods, and field reports. But everywhere Mark went, silence followed. Not hostile, not reverent. Something else. Respect. Uneasy, confused respect. Later that evening, as Mark sat on the edge of the medical tent, rewrapping his knee, a Churv competitor approached and dropped beside him. The alien's voice was hoarse. "I tried to mimic you. Yesterday. No blindfold. Just raw persistence. I collapsed. My internal temperature rose to dangerous levels." Mark looked over. "Sorry to hear that. I studied your vitals, your methods. I trained for months, but you still endured longer. Why?" Mark didn't answer at first. Then, "Because I've been broken before. And I remember what it felt like to wish someone hadn't given up on me." The Churv was silent. Then he laughed, dry and wheezing. "Respectfully, what is wrong with your species?" Mark smiled. "We ask ourselves that all the time." That night, the Coalition updated its training manual. Earth-based tasks may require re-evaluation. Human persistence presents atypical risk factors. Do not challenge humans to endurance trials without medical oversight. Ensure psychological support is available when interacting with post-event human personnel. Consider cultural reframing of never give up philosophy. It is not metaphorical, it is operational. When the final ship departed Earth's gravity, a Xalarian diplomat looked back one last time. "They didn't win because they were the strongest," she said, adjusting the pressure seals on her collar. "No," murmured Chloe beside her. "They just don't know when to stop." The Unity Games were over, but Earth hadn't exhaled yet. The Coalition's temporary base outside Nairobi was still humming with activity, albeit at a slower, more thoughtful pace. Cargo drones floated lazily over red dust trails, ferrying medical crates and disassembled terrain modules back toward orbit launch platforms. The once busy training fields lay quiet, marked by footprints, drag lines, and the occasional drop tool. Mark Reyes stood barefoot in the tall grass behind the medical tent. Knee brace finally secured, not the kind for show, but a proper post-contusion support wrap. He'd resisted long enough. The medics had nearly staged a mutiny. He was done pushing for now. His hands were wrapped around a mug of black coffee, not because he needed the caffeine, but because the warmth helped his fingers stop trembling. It had been 4 days since the shelter challenge, 2 days since the final medical evaluations, and 1 day since the Coalition formally published their internal report. Recommendation: increased caution when assigning Earth-based challenges. High adaptability potential observed. Pain response insufficient as predictive threshold. It was by far the driest way anyone had ever said, "Do not underestimate these people." He hadn't seen the summary until that morning. It was Chloe who brought it to him, tucked inside her equipment sleeve. He'd only laughed once while reading it. Psychological support required for alien observers following prolonged exposure to human behavior, he read aloud. You think I qualify for hazard pay? She ignored the question. You changed things. Mark looked up. I didn't win anything. That's not what I meant, she said. You weren't here to win. Later that afternoon, Director Liu called him into the command tent, a private debrief, briefed with the usual diplomatic polish. You're being requested, she said simply. By who? The chosen Educational Council, the Zalarian Command Branch, the Palrath Medical Authority, even a Viquari news node, though I think they just want a documentary title. Mark arched a brow. What kind of request? To teach, to explain, to help them understand what it is about humans that allows someone like you to keep going when every other participant tapped out. They've seen the data, they know what hurts. But not why you didn't stop. He frowned, running a thumb along the edge of his coffee cup. Is this one of those represent your whole species things again? It always was. He sighed, then nodded. Fine, but I'm not sugarcoating it. I'd be worried if you did. By evening, most of the delegations had begun their departure rotations. The launch pads flashed with green lift sequences as sleek transports cut upward through clouds. Mark didn't attend the ceremonies. There weren't any, not officially. Instead, he found himself sitting under the same baobab tree he'd visited before the first challenge, watching the horizon bleed orange and violet as the sun dipped low. A quiet shuffle behind him made him glance back. It was Eugen the Palrath engineer walking awkwardly on 3 stabilizing limbs, the 4th still splinted from her failed run. She sank down beside him with a low groan. You're still here, she said. Just until tomorrow. She nodded slowly. There's a saying on my world, stones do not yield. They only wear down slower. We always thought that was strength. You showed me it's something else. He smiled faintly. Persistence isn't about pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about doing the thing anyway, because it matters. Eugen looked down at her healing limb. I thought I understood endurance. Until I saw yours. There was a pause. Wind stirred the dust near the tree roots. Was it worth it? She asked. Mark turned to her, really looking this time. If even one of you goes back to your world and tells someone, don't give up just because it's hard, then yeah, it was. The next morning, as Mark prepared to board the shuttle back to Geneva Station, a coalition medical officer handed him a final health summary. He scanned it quickly. Left knee, healing. Recovery time 3 to 4 more weeks. Mild dehydration, resolved. Stress load, elevated, stable. Recommendation, rest and monitoring. At the bottom, someone had added a handwritten note. You don't stop because it hurts. You stop because someone else can start. Thank you. No signature. Just a quiet understanding between species who'd witnessed something rare together. High above Earth, aboard the outbound shuttle, Mark finally leaned back in his seat and let the ache in his muscles settle. Across from him, Chloe scrolled through her datapad, no longer needing translation software. She looked up suddenly. One more question, she said. Would you have kept going? If the shelter build had taken longer? If the blindfold had stayed on another hour? Mark didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the curve of the earth below, glowing blue and wild and impossibly unforgiving. I've carried people out of burning wrecks with a fractured ankle and 30 pounds of debris gear, he said finally. You keep going until the job's done. That's just how we're wired. Kahlo stared at him, then nodded. I will never understand that fully. You don't need to, he replied. Just don't bet against it. The final addendum to the coalition report wasn't written by a medical officer or diplomat. It came from Kali X7, the AI that had run the cognitive trials. It simply read, Note, human heuristic behavior is non-terminating. Their primary decision matrix appears bound not to outcome, but to will. Caution advised. Study ongoing. And somewhere deep in the coalition